Well, hey, welcome everyone to week 1 of our series, Weeds in My Garden. And the simple analogy we're using to guide this conversation is that while most of us are presenting roses to other people, we're really growing weeds. And it's time for all of us to get honest about that. And the weeds we're particularly talking about relate to our mental health. And on the one hand, I'm really excited about this series because I know how important this is and how needed it is. But if I was being honest, on the other hand, I'm a little apprehensive because it might be hard for some of us to talk about. And personally, I know how vast the topic is, and I really don't want to miss something or say something wrong or worse, like lead us in an unhelpful direction. I'm just convinced that we have to do something because everyone you know either needs to address their mental health or wants to help someone who does. And when we actually say mental health, we're talking about battling things like depression and anxiety, maybe being overwhelmed by stress. Maybe it relates to burnout and worry, or self-harm and potentially suicide. So I want to be clear about the goals of this series to be first and foremost coming to an understanding, where we validate our feelings and emotions and acknowledge the struggle that we face. And then to offer some help and hope in the scriptures and through Jesus, and then be able to give you resources to help you take some next steps. And this week, we begin by laying a foundation for the next several weeks. And the sentence that I used was this: it's okay to not be okay, and God's desire is to make you whole. It's going to be absolutely crucial that you have heard the message before you attempt to weigh in on the discussion, because I'm not going to take time to rehash all of the message, and there were some really important building blocks that I think are necessary to provide the proper framework for this conversation. Okay, it's okay to not be okay, which in a very simplistic way means that if you're struggling, it doesn't mean you're not a good Christian. It likely just means that you're human. And your challenge with mental health has roots, or many roots. That could be situational, or biological, or medical, or spiritual. It's okay to not be okay. And part 2, God wants to see that you're made whole, right? Spiritually, of course. But I think that includes emotionally and physically and relationally and mentally. And while some of that may not happen in this world, we can definitely begin taking steps towards a better version of us now. And so most of all, at the end of this week or the end of this series, I just simply want you to know that Jesus is the healer of souls and hearts. He's the healer of families, the healer who knows what's going on with us and in us, and even why we're struggling. And we all have weeds in our garden. And one day, God will restore us and make us whole. And in between this and that, there's some healing God wants to bring. So we're going to go on a journey to be honest about that. And I'm going to invite you to step into it and not ignore it. And I believe the thing we most need is hope. So as you get ready to jump into a discussion, please keep in mind, this issue is deeply personal, possibly highly emotionally charged, and some of us are carrying some really deep wounds. Just be gracious to one another. And try to keep in mind that your group leaders do not have all the answers. They're just trying their best to help facilitate a discussion. So here we go with week number 1 of Weeds in My Garden. It's okay to not be okay.